What would happen if every drop of oil on Earth vanished instantly? Full deep dive. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, and there's a strange, quiet panic in your brain? Not the kind of panic that comes from a bad dream, or a missed deadline, or a noise outside your window, but a cold, existential dread that creeps in when you realize just how fragile the world around you really is. The kind of panic that makes you stare at the ceiling and think, what if the things we take for granted, our phones, our food, our homes, our lives, just stopped working? I am Eric from Market Meridian Finance, and today we're covering a topic that is the scariest story of the entire planet. What would happen if every drop of oil on Earth vanished instantly, right now? No warning. No gradual decline. No time to prepare. Just poof, all 1.7 trillion barrels of proven oil reserves, gone in the blink of an eye. This is not a short. This is not a rage bait. This is not a clickbait headline designed to get you to watch for 10 seconds and move on. This is a complete, detailed deep dive into every single chain reaction that would ripple across the entire globe in the hours, days, weeks, months, and years after oil is gone. We're not just going to scratch the surface, we're going to dig into the nitty-gritty: how your morning coffee would disappear, how hospitals would shut down, how cities would turn into war zones, how entire continents would collapse, and how the human race would be forced to adapt or die in a world without the resource that built our modern civilization. I want to take a quick look around you right now. Stop the video for a second, literally. Pause it, and look at your surroundings. What do you see? The device you're holding, whether it's a phone, a tablet, a laptop, its casing, its battery, its screen, the plastic components that hold it together, all traceable back to oil. The lights in your room, if they're powered by electricity that comes from a power plant that burns oil, or if the wiring that connects them is insulated with oil-based materials, oil. The clothes you're wearing, if they're made of polyester, nylon, spandex, or any synthetic fabric, that's oil. The food you might have eaten today, whether it's a processed snack, a piece of fruit from another country, or even a home-cooked meal with vegetables from a local farm, the fertilizer that grew those vegetables, the pesticide that protected them, the tractor that harvested them, the truck that transported them to the store, the plastic packaging that kept them fresh, all oil. The medicine you take, from over-the-counter painkillers to life-saving antibiotics, from insulin to chemotherapy drugs, the pills, the capsules, the syringes, the 4 bags, the packaging, oil. The electricity that powers your home, the heat that keeps you warm in winter, the air conditioning that cools you in summer, the roads you drive on, the cars you drive, the planes you fly in, the ships that bring goods from across the world. So much of it is traceable back to a single, finite resource, oil. Today, we're going to walk through this collapse step by step, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, and continent by continent. We're going to talk about the first hour, when no one notices a thing, but the planet's heart has already stopped beating. We're going to talk about the first 24 hours, when global chaos erupts and modern life as we know it grinds to a halt. We're going to talk about the first 72 hours, when food, water, and medicine systems collapse, and millions of people die. We're going to talk about the weeks and months that follow, when governments fall, economies vanish, and civilization as we know it crumbles. And we're going to talk about the years after, when the human population is cut in half, and only the most resilient, self-sufficient communities survive. This is not a fantasy. This is not a doomsday prophecy cooked up for views. This is a real scenario that we're building to understand just how dependent we are on oil, and just how fragile our modern world really is. Every detail we're going to cover is based on real data, real infrastructure, real supply chains, and real human behavior. We're not making this up. We're just connecting the dots. By the end of this video, you will never look at a plastic bottle the same way again. You will never see a gas station, a farm, or a hospital in the same light. You will never take a road trip, a flight, or a trip to the grocery store for granted again. Because you will understand that every single one of those things is built on a foundation of oil, and that foundation could crumble at any moment, even if it's not as instant as the scenario we're exploring today. Let's begin. How dependent are we really? Before we jump into the collapse timeline, you need to understand just how deep our addiction to oil goes. This is not just part of the story, this is the entire premise. If you don't grasp how much we rely on oil for every aspect of our lives, you won't fully understand the chaos that would follow if it vanished. So let's start with the basics. Oil is not just a gasoline for cars. It is the lifeblood of modern civilization. It is the raw material that makes our world work. It is the foundation of our economy, our infrastructure, our food supply, our healthcare system, and our way of life. Let me start with some numbers that will make your jaw drop. The world uses roughly 100 million barrels of oil every single day. That's 4.2 billion gallons. Let me put that into perspective. The single barrel of oil is 42 gallons. So 100 million barrels is 4.2 billion gallons, enough to fill 6,363 Olympic-sized swimming pools every single day. That's how much oil we burn, use, and consume just to keep the world turning. And that number is only going up. By 2030, the International Energy Agency, IEA, predicts that global oil demand will reach 105 million barrels per day. We are not reducing our dependence, we are increasing it now. Let's break down where all that oil goes. Over 54% of that 100 million barrels per day goes straight to transportation: cars, trucks, buses, ships, airplanes, trains. Let's unpack that. Cars and light trucks account for about 28% of global oil demand. Commercial trucks, those big rigs that transport everything from food to furniture to medicine, account for another 15%. Ships, which carry 90% of the world's trade, account for 8%. Airplanes, which carry billions of people and tons of cargo every year, account for 3%. Trains and buses account for the remaining 0.5%. So when oil vanishes, every form of transportation that we rely on to get around, to move goods, to connect cities and countries, vanishes with it. Another 22% of global oil demand goes to industry. This is the part that most people forget about. Oil is not just fuel, it's a raw material for thousands of products. Plastic, for example, 99% of all plastic is made from oil or natural gas. Every plastic bottle, every plastic bag, every plastic toy, every plastic component in your phone, your computer, your car, all made from oil. Chemicals. Oil is the base for thousands of chemicals, including solvents, detergents, paints, adhesives, and synthetic fibers like polyester, nylon, and spandex. Asphalt. The roads you drive on are made from asphalt, which is a byproduct of oil refining. Electronics. The casing of your phone, the wiring, the circuit boards, all contain oil-based materials. Even the ink in your printer, the lipstick you wear, the sunscreen you put on, all made from oil. So when oil vanishes, the entire industrial sector grinds to a halt. No more plastic, no more chemicals, no more synthetic fabrics, no more paint, no more electronics, no more roads. The factories that make these products shut down. The workers lose their jobs. The supply chains that rely on these products collapse. Another 15% of global oil demand goes to homes and businesses for heating, cooking, and power. In many parts of the world, especially in colder climates like Canada, Northern Europe, and parts of the United States, homes and businesses rely on heating oil to stay warm in winter. In developing countries, many people use kerosene, a byproduct of oil, for cooking and lighting. And in some countries, like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and other oil-rich nations, oil is used to generate electricity directly. So when oil vanishes, these homes and businesses lose heat, lose light, lose the ability to cook. In cold climates, this means hypothermia and death. In developing countries, this means no way to prepare food or light homes after dark. Another 8% of global oil demand is used in agriculture. This is the most critical part of the story, because without oil, we can't feed the world. Let me repeat that, without oil, modern food production is impossible. Let's break it down. Fertilizers are made from oil. The Haber-Bosch process, which is used to make ammonia, the main component of nitrogen-based fertilizers, requires natural gas or oil as a feedstock. Without oil, there are no fertilizers. And without fertilizers, crop yields drop by 50 to 70%. Pesticides are made from oil. Without pesticides, crops are destroyed by insects, weeds, and diseases. Tractors, harvesters, and other farm machinery run on diesel fuel. Without diesel, farmers can't plow their fields, plant their crops, or harvest their yields. Irrigation systems, many of which are powered by diesel pumps or electricity generated from oil, stop working. Without irrigation, crops in dry regions die. And then there's transportation. Every piece of food you eat, whether it's grown locally or imported from across the world, is transported by diesel trucks, ships, or trains. Without oil, those vehicles stop. No more food moving from farms to stores. No more food moving from countries with surplus to countries with shortages. Without oil, our food system doesn't just slow down. It stops dead. And when the food system stops, people starve. Medicine. Even worse. Over 90% of all medical supplies are made from oil. Syringes, for bags, gloves, masks, plastic tools, prescription drugs, antibiotics, surgical implants, even the plastic in your toothbrush, all made from oil. Let's break that down. Prescription drugs. Many drugs are synthesized from oil-based chemicals. Antibiotics, for example, are made using petroleum-based feedstocks. Surgical implants, pacemakers, hip replacements, knee replacements, many of these are made from plastic or metal. Alloys that require oil to produce. Medical equipment, ventilators, dialysis machines, MRI scanners, all contain plastic components and require electricity, which in many cases is generated from oil. Ambulances run on diesel fuel. Without oil, ambulances can't respond to emergencies. Hospitals can't power their equipment. Doctors can't perform surgeries. Nurses can't administer medications. Vaccines and antibiotics expire because refrigeration fails. Refrigeration requires electricity, which often comes from oil. Without oil, modern medicine ceases to exist. And when modern medicine ceases to exist, millions of people die, from treatable diseases, from injuries, from chronic conditions like diabetes and cancer. This is not a choice. This is not an exaggeration. This is the reality we've built. Every wire, every screen, every plastic bag, every road, every pill, every meal, every trip, all of it is connected to a single, finite resource, oil. We have built a civilization that is completely and utterly dependent on oil. And if that oil vanishes instantly, our civilization collapses. It's that simple. And now, let's get to the scenario you've been waiting for. What is going to happen in the first 24 hours? Global instant chaos. First 24 hours, global instant chaos. This is the moment it happens. 100 million barrels of oil vanish in an instant. Not gradually. Not over weeks or months. Instantly. Every oil well, every refinery, every pipeline, every storage tank, every ship carrying oil. Every gas station pump, all empty. Poof. Gone. No explanation. No warning. Just nothing. The clock starts now. Let's walk through each hour, step by step. Hour 1, almost no one notices. Phones work. Lights are on. TV is playing. Data is still streaming. Your coffee maker works. Your car starts, for now, because the fuel in the tank is still there, but there's no way to refill it. The world feels normal. But beneath the surface, the planet shifts on its axis. Every refinery on the planet stops instantly. Every oil pump shuts off. Every pipeline goes dry. The oil industry, the backbone of the global economy, collapses in a matter of seconds. Oil companies, which employ millions of people worldwide, are instantly bankrupt. Traders on Wall Street panic as oil prices skyrocket to infinity, but there's no oil to trade. But for the average person, life goes on, for now. They don't know that the fuel in their car is the last fuel they'll ever have. They don't know that the plastic bottle of water they're drinking is the last plastic bottle they'll ever use. They don't know that the food in their fridge is the last food they'll ever buy from a grocery store. They don't know that the world as they know it is already dead, they just haven't realized it yet. Hour 2, the first signs of trouble appear. Oil refineries around the world issue emergency alerts. Pipeline operators report that their pipelines are dry. Gas station owners check their storage tanks and find them empty. But most people still don't panic. They think it's a temporary glitch, a power outage, a pipeline leak, a supply chain issue. They think it will be fixed by the end of the day. They go about their morning routines, going to work, dropping kids off at school, stopping at the gas station to fill up, only to find the pumps dry. Some people grumble. Some people take photos of the empty gas pumps and post them on social media. But no one realizes that this is the end of modern life. Hour 3, panic starts to set in for those in the know. Oil company executives, government officials, and emergency responders realize that this is not a temporary glitch. This is a global catastrophe. They try to issue warnings, but the media is slow to react. Most news outlets are still covering their regular stories, celebrity gossip, sports, politics, because they haven't been told the full extent of the crisis. Meanwhile, truck drivers across the country start to notice that gas stations are out of fuel. They call their dispatchers, who have no answers. Some truck drivers decide to pull over and wait for fuel. Others try to find alternative routes to find gas. But there is no gas. The fuel in their tanks is the last fuel they'll ever have. Hour 4, all gas stations run dry. Every gas station in the world, from New York to Tokyo, from London to Lagos, has no fuel left. The pumps are shut off. Signs are put up, no gas. Sorry. Panic starts to spread among the general public. People who tried to fill up their cars are now stranded. They start to realize that this is not a temporary issue. Planes are grounded mid-flight. Thousands of flights are in the air when oil vanishes. Planes run on jet fuel, which is made from oil. Without jet fuel, planes can't fly. Pilots are forced to make emergency landings at the nearest airport. Some planes don't make it, they run out of fuel mid-air and crash. Thousands of people die in these crashes. Ships lose power in the middle of the ocean. Cargo ships, cruise ships, tankers, all rely on diesel fuel. Without diesel, their engines shut off. They drift aimlessly in the ocean, stranded. Passengers on cruise ships are trapped, with no way to get back to land. Cargo ships carrying food, medicine, and other critical supplies are stuck, unable to deliver their goods. Truck drivers shut off their engines. Bus and taxi drivers are stranded in the middle of the road. Highways become parking lots. Miles and miles of cars, trucks, buses, all stuck, with no fuel to move. Delivery vans, postal vehicles, garbage trucks, all stop. No more food moving, no more goods, no more services. The supply chain collapses in an instant. Hour 5, public transportation grinds to a halt. Buses, trains, trams, subways, all stop. In cities like New York, London, Tokyo, and Mumbai, millions of people rely on public transportation to get to work, to school, to the store. Now, they're stranded. They can't get home. They can't get to work. They can't get food. Chaos starts to erupt in train stations and bus terminals. People push and shove, trying to get information. No one has answers. Emergency services are overwhelmed. 911 calls, 112 calls, 999 calls, all flooding in. People report car crashes, plane crashes, stranded loved ones, empty gas stations. But emergency responders can't help. Their ambulances, fire trucks, and police cars run on diesel fuel. They have a limited supply of fuel in their tanks, and once it's gone, they can't respond. Some emergency responders start to prioritize calls, only responding to life-threatening emergencies. Others abandon their posts to take care of their own families. Hour 6, grocery stores start to see a rush of customers. People realize that if there's no fuel, there will be no more food deliveries. They rush to the store to buy as much food, water, and supplies as possible. Shelves start to empty. Canned food, bottled water, paper towels, toilet paper, medicine, all flying off the shelves. Store employees are overwhelmed. They can't restock the shelves because there are no delivery trucks. Some stores start to limit how much each customer can buy. Others close early because they're out of supplies. Panic buying turns into chaos. People argue over the last can of beans, the last bottle of water. Fights break out. Some stores are looted. Thieves break in and steal whatever supplies are left. The police can't respond, they're stuck without fuel. Hour 7, power grids start to show signs of strain. Many power plants around the world rely on oil to generate electricity. In countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and other oil-rich nations, oil is the primary source of electricity. In these countries, power grids start to fail. Lights go out. Air conditioning stops. Refrigerators stop working. People are plunged into darkness. In other countries, like the United States, Canada, and Europe, power grids rely on a mix of oil, coal, natural gas, and renewable energy. But even these grids are vulnerable. Coal-fired power plants require coal to be transported by diesel trucks. Without diesel, coal can't be delivered. Natural gas power plants require natural gas to be transported by pipelines, which often rely on oil-powered compressors. Without oil, the compressors stop, and natural gas can't flow. Renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro, can only generate a small percentage of the world's electricity. In most countries, renewable energy accounts for less than 20% of total electricity generation. So even if solar panels and wind turbines are working, they can't power the entire grid. Power outages start to spread across the globe. Hour 8, communication systems start to fail. Cell phone towers rely on electricity to operate. When power grids fail, cell phone towers go down. People can't make calls, send texts, or access the internet. Landline phones, many of which are powered by electricity, also stop working. The internet collapses. Data centers, which power the internet, rely on electricity. Without electricity, data centers shut down. No more social media, no more email, no more news updates. People are cut off from the outside world. They don't know what's happening in other parts of the country or the world. They don't know if their loved ones are safe. This isolation fuels panic. People start to spread rumors, some true, some false. Some people say that the oil vanished because of a terrorist attack. Others say it's a natural disaster. Others say it's the end of the world. No one knows for sure, and there's no way to find out. Hour 9, hospitals start to prepare for the worst. Hospitals rely on electricity to power their equipment, ventilators, dialysis machines, MRI scanners, refrigerators for vaccines and medicine. They also rely on diesel generators for backup power. But diesel generators require diesel fuel. Hospitals have a limited supply of diesel, usually enough to last 2 to 3 days. They start to ration power. They turn off non-essential equipment. They prioritize critical patients, those on life support, those in intensive care. Nurses and doctors work overtime, trying to care for as many patients as possible. But they know that once the diesel runs out, they can't help anyone. Patients with chronic conditions, insulin-dependent diabetics, cancer patients, people with heart disease, start to panic. They know that without medicine, without treatment, they will die. Hour 10, water systems start to fail. Urban water treatment plants rely on electricity to power their pumps and filters. Without electricity, the pumps stop. Taps go dry. People can't get clean water to drink, to cook, to bathe. In cities like Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Dubai, cities that rely on water pumped from hundreds of miles away, water pressure drops rapidly. Within hours, taps are completely dry. People start to collect rainwater, but it's not enough. They start to panic, rushing to rivers, lakes, and streams to get water. But these sources are often contaminated. Sewage systems also rely on electricity. Without electricity, sewage pumps stop. Sewage backs up into streets, rivers, and oceans. Water becomes a toxic, dangerous resource. The modern world returns instantly to the medieval, where clean water is a luxury, and disease is rampant. Hour 11, schools and businesses close. Schools close because there's no way for students and teachers to get to school, public transportation is down, and cars are stuck. Businesses close because there's no electricity, no way to get supplies, and no way for employees to get to work. Restaurants close because they can't cook, no electricity, no gas, and they can't get food deliveries. Retail stores close because they're out of supplies, and there's no way to restock. The global economy grinds to a halt. Millions of people lose their jobs, permanently. They have no way to earn money, no way to buy food, no way to pay their bills. They're left with nothing. Hour 12, power grids start to fail on a massive scale. nations that rely on oil for electricity, like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, parts of the US, go dark first. Entire cities are plunged into darkness. In the United States, cities like Houston, Dallas, and Los Angeles, cities that rely heavily on oil for electricity, lose power completely. In Europe, cities like Berlin, Paris, and London start to lose power. Medical systems lose power. Ventilators shut off. Dialysis machines stop. Patients die. No more connectivity spots. No internet. No cell phone service. People are completely cut off from each other. Panic spreads like wildfire. People start to leave their homes, searching for food, water, and information. They gather in public places, parks, squares, train stations, trying to find answers. But there are no answers. Only chaos. Hour 13, fires break out. Without electricity, fire alarms don't work. Without fire trucks, which run on diesel, fires can't be put out. Small fires, from candles, from stoves left on, from electrical shorts, spread quickly. In cities, where buildings are close together, fires rage out of control. People are trapped in their homes, unable to escape. Firefighters can't help, they're stuck without fuel. Thousands of people die in the fires. Smoke fills the air, making it hard to breathe. The air becomes toxic. Hour 14, food shortages become critical. Grocery stores are completely out of supplies. Shelves are bare. People who didn't stock up are now desperate. They start to beg, borrow, and steal food. Fights break out over a single can of food, a single bottle of water. In some neighborhoods, people form gangs to protect their supplies. In other neighborhoods, people band together to share what little they have. But the supplies are limited. The food that's left won't last long. Hour 15, hospitals start to lose power. Backup generators run out of diesel fuel. Ventilators shut off. Dialysis machines stop. Vaccines and antibiotics expire because refrigeration fails. Doctors and nurses can't care for their patients. They're forced to make impossible choices: who to save, who to let die. Elderly patients, sick patients, infants, those who are most vulnerable, will die first. Hospitals become places of death, not healing. Families are torn apart as their loved ones die in front of them, with no way to help. Hour 16, civil order starts to break down. Police forces are overwhelmed. They can't respond to all the calls for help. They don't have fuel for their cars, and they don't have the manpower to control the chaos. In some cities, police officers abandon their posts to take care of their own families. In other cities, police officers join the chaos, stealing food and supplies for themselves. Riots break out. Looting becomes widespread. Stores are ransacked. Homes are broken into. People are attacked for their food, their water, their supplies. The streets become dangerous. No one is safe. Hour 17, transportation of critical supplies stops completely. Ambulances can't respond to emergencies. Fire trucks can't put out fires. Police cars can't patrol the streets. Delivery trucks can't deliver food, water, or medicine. The only way to get around is on foot or by bike. But even that is dangerous. Streets are filled with abandoned cars, fires, and rioters. People start to stay in their homes, locked in, scared for their lives. They don't know what's going to happen next. They don't know if they'll survive the night. Hour 18, cities are hit with mass panic. People run for water, canned food, paper, medicine. Shelves empty in hours. Stores are looted. Emergency signals go out, but no one is coming. People start to realize that no one is going to save them. The government is nowhere to be found. Emergency services are gone. They're on their own. Some people start to leave the cities, heading to rural areas where they think they can find food and water. But rural areas are not safe either. Farmers can't harvest their crops without diesel, and rural communities also rely on oil for power and supplies. The mass exodus from cities clogs the roads even more. Abandoned cars pile up. People walk for miles, carrying whatever supplies they can. Many die along the way, from exhaustion, from dehydration, from violence. Hour 19, water pressure drops to zero in most major cities. Taps are completely dry. People are forced to drink contaminated water from rivers, lakes, and streams. Diseases start to spread: cholera, typhoid, dysentery. These diseases, which were once eradicated in most developed countries, make a comeback. People get sick. They have no medicine to treat their illnesses. They die in their homes, in the streets, wherever they are. The death toll starts to rise exponentially. Hour 20, the first deaths from starvation are reported. People who didn't stock up on food, and who can't find any food in their area, start to die of hunger. Infants, the elderly, and the sick are the first to go. Families watch as their loved ones die, unable to do anything to help. The pain and despair are overwhelming. People start to lose hope. They realize that this is not a temporary crisis. This is the end. Hour 21, governments issue emergency declarations. But it's too late. They have no way to enforce their orders. They have no way to deliver supplies. They have no way to communicate with the public. Most government officials are either stranded or hiding, trying to save themselves and their families. Some governments collapse entirely. Others try to maintain control, but they have no power, literally and figuratively. The rule of law is gone. Anarchy reigns. Hour 22, fires continue to rage. Smoke covers the sky. Air quality becomes dangerous. People can't breathe. They cough, they wheeze, they get sick. The fires destroy homes, businesses, and infrastructure. Entire neighborhoods are reduced to ash. People are left homeless, with no place to go. They huddle together in parks, in shelters, in whatever safe places they can find. But there are no safe places. Hour 23, medical supplies run out. Hospitals have no more syringes, no more for bags, no more gloves, no more masks. Doctors and nurses have no way to treat their patients. They're forced to use primitive methods, cleaning wounds with contaminated water, using cloth instead of bandages. But it's not enough. More people die. The hospitals are overwhelmed with the dead and the dying. Bodies pile up in hallways, in parking lots, in the streets. There's no way to bury them. Funeral homes can't operate without fuel, and there's no way to transport the bodies. The stench of death fills the air. Hour 24, the first full day ends. Here's the snapshot. All road transportation dead. All air transportation dead. All rail, diesel, dead. Most ocean shipping dead. 40% of the world's power grid unstable or completely offline. No more plastic, no more synthetic fabrics, no more fuel. Water pressure dropping to zero in major cities. Hospitals switching to backup power, which is already running low on fuel, and will be gone in the next 24 to 48 hours. Food shortages critical. Looting and rioting widespread. Civil order broken. Millions of people dead. And this is just day one. And it only gets exponentially worse from here. The first 24 hours are just the beginning. The real collapse happens in the next 72 hours, when food, water, and medicine systems completely collapse. Let's talk about that. Food, water, medicine collapse in 72 hours by day 2. The world is not a temporary outage. This is permanent. People start to realize that the oil is never coming back. There's no way to replace it. No way to generate enough fuel to get the world back to normal. The initial panic turns into people start to accept that they're living in a post-oil world, and that post-oil world is a world of suffering, death, and chaos. Remember, most cities only have 3 to 5 days of food on hand. That's a fact. Cities are not self-sufficient. They rely on food being transported from farms to stores via trucks, ships, and trains. Without oil, those trucks, ships, and trains stop. No more food moving. No more restock. By day 2, most grocery stores are completely out of food. The only food left is what people have stockpiled in their homes. And for many people, that stockpile is already running low. Families start to ration their food, eating one small meal a day, or less. They skip meals to feed their children. But even with rationing, the food won't last long. Farmers can't harvest crops. Without diesel machinery, they can't plow their fields, plant their crops, or harvest their yields. Even if they have crops ready to harvest, they can't get them to market. The crops rot in the fields. Fruit falls from trees, uneaten. Vegetables wilt in the sun. The world's food supply, already stretched thin, collapses. Crop failure for the next growing season is guaranteed. Without fertilizers and pesticides, crops will be destroyed by insects, weeds, and diseases. Without irrigation, crops in dry regions will die. Global famine is now guaranteed. And famine doesn't just mean hunger, it means starvation, malnutrition, and death. Millions of people will die of starvation in the weeks and months to come. Water systems fail next. 90% of urban water treatment relies on electricity. Pumps stop running. Taps go dry. Sewage backs up into streets, rivers, and oceans. Water becomes a toxic, dangerous resource. The modern world returns instantly to the medieval. People are forced to drink contaminated water, which leads to the spread of waterborne diseases like cholera, typhoid, and dysentery. These diseases kill quickly, especially in children, the elderly, and the sick. In cities like Lima, Peru, a desert city that relies on pumped water from the Andes Mountains, water runs out in hours. People are forced to walk miles to find water, and even then, the water is contaminated. In cities like Mumbai, India, where millions of people live in slums, sewage floods the streets, spreading disease and death. The lack of clean water is one of the biggest killers in the post-oil world. Hospitals are the next to break. Generators stop. Ventilators shut off. Dialysis machines stop. Vaccines and antibiotics expire because refrigeration fails. Doctors can't care for their patients. Nurses are overwhelmed. Millions of vulnerable people, elderly, sick, infants, die in these first 3 days. Let's break it down. Insulin-dependent diabetics, without insulin, which is made from oil-based chemicals, and requires refrigeration, they go into diabetic ketoacidosis and die within days. Cancer. Patients, without chemotherapy drugs, made from oil, without radiation therapy, which requires electricity, they die from their disease. People on life support, without ventilators, which require electricity, they die within minutes. Infants, without formula, which is made from oil-based ingredients, without clean water, they die of malnutrition and disease. The elderly, without medicine, without heat, without clean water, they die of hypothermia, infection, and organ failure. Hospitals become graveyards. Doctors and nurses, exhausted and traumatized, start to abandon their posts. They can't take the suffering anymore. They can't save anyone. They just want to save themselves and their families. Social order snaps. Small fights break out over water and food. These fights turn into full-scale riots. Gangs form, taking control of neighborhoods, stealing food and supplies, and attacking anyone who gets in their way. Police forces are overwhelmed. They have no fuel for their cars, no way to communicate, and no way to control the chaos. In some places, officers abandon their posts to take care of their own families. In other places, officers join the gangs, using their training and weapons to steal and kill. Prisons are abandoned. Inmates escape, adding to the chaos. They steal, they kill, they rape. The streets become a war zone. No one is safe. People are forced to stay in their homes, locked in, scared for their lives. They don't go outside unless they have to. And when they do, they risk being attacked, robbed, or killed. Communication is completely gone. No cell phone service, no internet, no landline phones. People have no way to contact their loved ones. They don't know if their family members are alive or dead. They don't know what's happening in other parts of the country or the world. This isolation fuels paranoia. People start to trust no one. They suspect their neighbors of hiding food and water. They turn on each other. Communities break down. The bonds that hold society together, trust, cooperation, kindness, are broken. It's every man for himself. By day 3, the world as we know it is over. Civilization, as we know it in modern cities, is gone. The cities are lawless, dangerous, and unlivable. People are dying in the streets. Food and water are scarce. Disease is rampant. Fires rage. Chaos reigns. But the collapse is not the same across the globe. Different continents have different resources, different infrastructure, and different ways of life. So let's break it down, continent by continent. Let's see how each part of the world fares in the post-oil apocalypse. Continent by continent collapse. Analysis. Every continent is different. Some are more dependent on oil than others. Some have more resources. Some have more rural communities that can survive without oil. But no continent is immune. Every continent will collapse, but some will collapse faster than others. Let's start with North America. North America, United States, Canada. North America is one of the most high-energy, resource-rich parts of the world. It has massive agricultural land, abundant fresh water, and advanced infrastructure. But it is also structurally weaker than other parts of the world. Why? Because North America is built for cars, not for self-sufficiency. It is a continent of suburbs, of long commutes, of reliance on imported goods and centralized systems. When oil vanishes, North America collapses quickly. United States, the US is built for cars, not walking. 84% of us live in cities or suburbs. Suburban families run out of water and food first because they can't walk to a store. Suburbs are designed around the car, grocery stores, pharmacies, and other essential services are miles away. Without a car, suburban families can't get supplies. They're trapped. Cities like Los Angeles, Houston, Phoenix, and Atlanta are water scarce. They rely on pumped water from hundreds of miles away. Los Angeles gets most of its water from the Colorado River, which is hundreds of miles east. Phoenix gets its water from the Salt River and groundwater, which requires pumps powered by electricity. When the power goes out, the pumps stop. Taps go dry. These cities become unlivable within days. New York and Chicago hold out longer, they have more access to fresh water, the Hudson River, Lake Michigan, and more diverse power grids. But even they can't hold out forever. Their power grids will fail rapidly. Their food supplies will run out. Their water systems will collapse. Hospitals in America have some of the best backup systems in the world, but even they run out of fuel in just 2 to 3 days. Insulin-dependent diabetics, cancer patients, and people on life support die in mass. The US has one of the highest rates of chronic diseases in the world: diabetes, heart disease, cancer. Without medicine, without treatment, without electricity, these people die. The death toll in hospitals is staggering. Morgues are overwhelmed. Bodies pile up. There's no way to bury them. The stench of death fills the air. The US has massive agricultural land, the breadbasket of the world. States like Iowa, Illinois, Kansas, and Nebraska grow millions of tons of corn, wheat, and soybeans every year. But without diesel machinery, farmers can't plant or harvest. The tractors, harvesters, and irrigation systems stop working. The crops rot in the fields. The breadbasket of the world would wither in a week. The urban population, 84% of the country, would starve within 10 days. Rural communities fare better at first. They have access to local food, they can grow their own crops, they can hunt and fish. But even rural communities rely on oil for power, for medicine, for tools. Without oil, their tractors stop. Their generators stop. Their tools break, and there's no way to replace them. Rural communities will survive longer than cities, but they will eventually collapse too. Canada has more land and fresh water per capita than any other country in the world. It has vast forests, abundant lakes and rivers, and massive agricultural land. But energy in Canada is still oil and gas heavy. 70% of Canada's energy comes from oil and gas. Remote communities, like those in the Arctic, in northern Quebec, and in British Columbia, lose power immediately. These communities rely on diesel generators for power and heat. Without diesel, they freeze to death in the winter. Cities like Toronto and Vancouver follow in 2 to 3 days. Toronto relies on electricity generated from a mix of nuclear, hydro, and natural gas. But natural gas requires pipelines powered by oil. Without oil, the pipelines stop. Nuclear power plants require electricity to operate. If the grid fails, the nuclear plants shut down. Vancouver relies on hydroelectric power, which is more resilient. But even hydroelectric power requires maintenance, which requires tools and parts made from oil. Without oil, the hydroelectric plants will eventually fail. The oil sands industry in Alberta collapses overnight. The oil sands employ hundreds of thousands of people. When oil vanishes, these people lose their jobs. They have no way to earn money, no way to buy food, no way to pay their bills. Many of them live in remote areas, far from cities. They're stranded, with no way to get supplies. Medical cities like Ottawa and the most expensive vulnerable elder care facilities long-distance care collapse first. Elderly people in these facilities rely on medicine, on heat, on electricity. Without these, they die. Public services end within 48 hours. Police, fire, and emergency services stop. Garbage collection stops. Water treatment stops. People begin to move north for resources, fresh water, game, and land. But the north is cold, and it's hard to survive there without proper equipment. Many people die on their way north, from cold, from hunger, from exhaustion. Overall, North America collapses in 7 to 14 days. Cities risk total loss of water, food, and fuel, but even the rural areas are not safe. The US and Canada are built for a high-energy, oil-dependent lifestyle. When that energy is taken away, their civilization collapses quickly. The death toll will be in the millions within the first month. South America, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Brazil, Argentina. South America is a mix of extreme farmland, dense megacities, and remote indigenous villages. Its collapse is uneven. Some parts of South America will survive longer than others. Remote indigenous villages, which rely on traditional farming and hunting, will survive for months, even years. But the megacities and the industrialized areas will collapse quickly. Brazil is the largest country in South America. It has massive rainforests, vast agricultural land, and dense megacities. São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro are 24-hour cities. They rely on electricity, on water pumped uphill, on food imports, and on oil for transportation. Water is pumped uphill to these cities. Without electricity, the pumps stop. In 24 hours, taps go dry. Chaos erupts immediately. People rush to find water, to find food. Looting and rioting break out. The favelas, slums, of Rio de Janeiro become even more dangerous. Gangs take control, stealing food and water, and attacking anyone who gets in their way. Small villages that live off the land and survive on local food, rainwater, and old equipment endure longer. These villages are in the Amazon rainforest or in rural areas. They grow their own crops, hunt, fish, and collect rainwater. They have no reliance on oil. But the gold export economy dies completely. Brazil is one of the world's largest gold exporters. Gold is mined using heavy machinery that runs on diesel. Without diesel, the mines shut down. The gold export economy collapses, leaving thousands of miners unemployed. These miners, who are often in remote areas, are stranded. They have no way to get food, no way to get water. Many of them die. Argentina has massive farmland. The Pampas region is one of the most fertile regions in the world. It grows corn, soybeans, wheat, and beef. But at scale, no oil means no planting, no harvest. The farmers in the Pampas rely on diesel tractors, fertilizers, and pesticides. Without oil, they can't farm. The crops rot in the fields. The beef industry collapses, cattle can't be transported to market, and there's no way to process the meat. Buenos Aires is no different from any other Western city. It relies on electricity, on water pumped from the Parana River, on food imports, and on oil for transportation. When oil vanishes, Buenos Aires loses power, loses water, loses food. Chaos erupts. The economy's valuable corn and soy exports vanish completely. Argentina's economy is heavily dependent on agricultural exports. Without these exports, the economy collapses. Millions of people lose their jobs. They have no way to earn money, no way to buy food. They starve. Andean nations, Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia. These nations are mountainous, with a mix of cities and remote mountain villages. Mountain villages survive best. They have access to glacial water, traditional farming, and no reliance on imports. These villages grow potatoes, quinoa, and other crops that don't require fertilizers or pesticides. They raise llamas and alpacas for food and wool. They collect rainwater and glacial meltwater for drinking. They have no need for oil. They will survive for months, even years. But cities like Lima, Peru, which is a desert city with 30 minutes of fresh water reserves, die within hours. Lima is a city of 10 million people. It relies on water pumped from the Andes Mountains. Without electricity, the pumps stop. Taps go dry in 30 minutes. People rush to find water, but there's none. Chaos erupts. Looting and rioting break out. People die of dehydration within days. Quito, Ecuador, and La Paz, Bolivia, cities located high in the Andes, fare better at first. They have access to glacial water, and the climate is cooler, so they don't need air conditioning. But they still rely on oil for electricity and transportation. When the power goes out, and the food runs out, they collapse. Overall, South America's collapse is uneven. Remote villages survive longer, but megacities collapse quickly. The death toll will be high in the cities, but lower in rural areas. South America will take 10 to 20 days to fully collapse. Europe, UK, Germany, France, Italy, Eastern Europe. Europe is intensely power dependent and energy importing. It has advanced infrastructure, but it relies heavily on imported oil and gas. Europe is the first to completely catastrophize. Why? Because Europe has very little domestic oil production. Over 90% of Europe's oil is imported. When oil vanishes, Europe has no way to replace it. Its power grids fail, its transportation stops, its food supply collapses. Europe is a continent of small, dense countries. Cities are close together, which means that chaos spreads quickly. Western Europe, Germany, France, UK. These countries have the best infrastructure in the world. They have advanced power grids, modern hospitals, and efficient transportation systems. But they import over 90% of their oil. Within 48 hours, electricity grids fail. Germany relies heavily on natural gas for electricity, which is transported via pipelines from Russia. Without oil, the pipelines stop. Natural gas pipelines require oil-powered compressors. France relies on nuclear power for 70% of its electricity. But nuclear power plants require electricity to operate. If the grid fails, the nuclear plants shut down. The UK relies on a mix of natural gas, nuclear, and renewable energy. But natural gas pipelines stop, and renewable energy can't power the entire grid. The UK is an island nation. This makes its collapse even worse. Trucks stop, trains stop, ferries stop. There's no way to bring in food, water, or medicine from other countries. The UK has only 3 to 5 days of food on hand. When the food runs out, people starve. Hospitals fail within 3 days. Generators run out of fuel. Ventilators shut off. Dialysis machines stop. Vaccines and antibiotics expire. Doctors can't care for their patients. no more water, no more food. London, which is a city of 9 million people, goes dark in 72 hours. Chaos erupts. Looting and rioting break out. People are trapped on the island, with no way to escape. Paris, Berlin, and other Western European cities follow the same pattern. They lose power, lose water, lose food. Chaos spreads. The streets become dangerous. People are forced to stay in their homes, locked in. The elderly and the sick die first. Western Europe's advanced healthcare system collapses, leaving millions of people without treatment. Eastern Europe, cities like Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria are even more dependent on Russian oil. They import over 95% of their oil from Russia. When oil vanishes, they collapse faster. These countries have less advanced infrastructure than Western Europe. Their power grids are more vulnerable. Their hospitals have fewer resources. No heating in winter means hypothermia deaths within days. Eastern Europe has harsh winters, temperatures drop well below zero. Without heating oil, people freeze to death in their homes. Rural areas in Eastern Europe fare better. They have access to local food, they can grow their own crops, they can heat their homes with wood. But even rural areas rely on oil for medicine and tools. Without oil, they will eventually collapse. Overall, Europe collapses in 5 to 10 days. It is the first continent to fully collapse because of its heavy reliance on imported oil. The death toll will be in the millions within the first 2 weeks. Asia, China, India, Japan, Southeast Asia, Middle East Asia is the most populated, most oil-dependent region on Earth. It has over 4.7 billion people, 60% of the world's population. The collapse here is the fastest and deadliest. Asia relies heavily on oil for transportation, industry, agriculture, and power. When oil vanishes, Asia's massive population is left without food, water, and medicine. The death toll will be higher in Asia than in any other continent. China and India, these two countries have a combined population of 2.8 billion people. That's 36% of the world's population. Cities like Shanghai, Beijing, Mumbai, Delhi are built on constant energy and food imports. These cities are massive. Shanghai has 24 million people, Mumbai has 20 million people. They rely on oil for transportation, for electricity, for food imports. No oil means no coal. Transport, coal is transported by diesel trucks and trains. No power. Many power plants in China and India rely on coal, which can't be delivered without diesel. No food. Most food in these cities is imported from rural areas or other countries, which requires transportation. Farms in both nations rely heavily on fertilizers and diesel machinery. China is the world's largest producer of food, but it relies on oil-based fertilizers and diesel tractors. Without oil, crop failure is immediate. The same is true for India. India's agricultural sector employs 50% of its population, but it relies on diesel machinery and fertilizers. Without oil, farmers can't plant or harvest. The crops rot in the fields. Famine will spread faster than any disease. In India, where millions of people already live in poverty, famine will kill millions within weeks. In China, where the government has stockpiled food, the stockpiles will run out quickly. The cities will descend into chaos. People will fight for food and water. The death toll will be in the hundreds of millions. Japan and South Korea, these are island nations, 100% dependent on imported oil and food. Japan imports 99% of its oil and 60% of its food. South Korea imports 97% of its oil and 70% of its food. When oil vanishes, there's no way to bring in supplies. Tokyo and Seoul will lose power in 24 hours. Water systems fail. No way to bring in food, water, or medicine. The elderly and sick die first. Japan has one of the oldest populations in the world. 28% of its population is over 65. These elderly people rely on medicine, on heat, on electricity. Without these, they die. Seoul is a city of 10 million people. It relies on water pumped from the Han River, which requires electricity to treat and distribute. When the power goes out, taps run dry in hours. Both Tokyo and Seoul are dense, modern cities with little space for local farming. There's no way to grow enough food to feed their populations. Riots break out within 48 hours as people fight for the last remaining supplies. The small rural communities in Japan's countryside and South Korea's mountainous regions fare slightly better, but they still rely on imported medicine and tools. Without oil, their traditional farming methods can't sustain large numbers, and they too collapse within weeks. Southeast Asia, countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines face a double crisis: dense megacities and reliance on oil for both industry and agriculture. Jakarta, Bangkok, and Manila are overcrowded, with millions living in slums. These cities rely on oil for transportation, electricity, and food imports. Jakarta, which is already sinking, loses power and water within 24 hours. The slums become death traps: no clean water, no food, no medical care. Disease spreads like wildfire, killing thousands every day. Thailand's tourism industry, which relies on flights and transportation, collapses overnight. Millions of tourism workers lose their jobs and are left stranded. Vietnam's rice fields, while abundant, rely on diesel pumps for irrigation and oil-based fertilizers. Without oil, rice yields plummet, and famine spreads across the country. The Philippines, an archipelago, has no way to transport supplies between islands. Ferries are stranded, and planes are grounded. Remote islands are cut off completely, with no way to get food or medicine. Their populations starve or die of disease within days. Coastal communities, which rely on fishing, can't repair their boats, made with oil-based materials, or power their motors, leaving them without a food source. Middle East. The Middle East is the world's oil heartland, and that makes its collapse the most ironic and devastating. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and the UAE have built their entire economies and societies around oil. They import 80% of their food because their deserts can't support large-scale agriculture. When oil vanishes, their economies collapse overnight. Saudi Arabia, which uses oil to desalinate seawater, a process that requires massive amounts of energy, loses access to clean water within hours. Desalination plants stop working, and taps run dry. The wealthy cities of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, with their skyscrapers and luxury amenities, become unlivable. People flee to rural areas, but there's no water or food there either. Iraq and Iran, which have already struggled with instability, descend into full-scale civil war. Gangs and militias fight for control of the few remaining resources: water, food, and any usable tools. The Middle East's oil infrastructure, once the envy of the world, becomes a graveyard. Without oil, the region's deserts become even more unforgiving. Temperatures soar above 120 degrees Fahrenheit 49 degrees Celsius in summer, and without air conditioning, powered by oil, people die of heat stroke. The death toll in the Middle East is catastrophic. Millions die within the first week from dehydration, heat, and violence. Overall, Asia collapses in 3 to 7 days, the fastest of any continent. Its massive population, heavy oil dependence, and lack of self-sufficiency in food and water make it the deadliest region in the post-oil world. The death toll will be in the billions within the first month. Africa, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. Africa is a continent of extremes, some of the most oil-dependent nations in the world, alongside some of the least oil-reliant rural communities. Its collapse is uneven, but the suffering is universal. North African nations like Nigeria, Algeria, and Libya are oil exporters. Their economies are entirely built on oil. Sub-Saharan Africa, while less dependent on oil for energy, relies on imported oil for transportation and agriculture. North Africa, Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer. Its economy relies on oil for 90% of its export revenue. When oil vanishes, Nigeria's government collapses immediately. The oil industry employs millions of people, all of them lose their jobs. Lagos, Nigeria's largest city, 21 million people, loses power and water within 24 hours. The city's slums, already overcrowded and poor, become centers of chaos. People fight for water and food. Disease spreads rapidly. Algeria and Libya, which also rely heavily on oil exports, face the same fate. Their governments can't provide basic services, no power, no water, no food. Rural communities in North Africa, which rely on traditional farming and herding, fare better at first. But they rely on imported tools and medicine. Without oil, those tools break, and there's no way to replace them. Herders can't transport their livestock to markets, and their animals die of starvation. Famine spreads across the region. Sub-Saharan Africa, most countries here have little access to oil, but they rely on imported oil for diesel, for generators and farm machinery, and gasoline, for transportation. Countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, and South Africa use diesel generators to power homes and businesses. Without diesel, those generators stop. South Africa, the most industrialized country in sub-Saharan Africa, relies on coal for electricity, but coal is transported by diesel trucks. Without diesel, coal can't be delivered, and power grids fail. Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban lose power within 48 hours. Cape Town, which already faced water crises in the past, runs out of water completely. Rural communities in sub-Saharan Africa, which rely on subsistence farming, are the most resilient. They grow their own crops, raise livestock, and collect rainwater. They have no reliance on oil. But they still face challenges: no medicine for diseases like malaria and HIV, no tools to repair their farms, and no way to protect their crops from pests. When famine spreads from urban areas, rural communities are overwhelmed by refugees. The limited food they have is quickly exhausted, and they too face starvation. Overall, Africa's collapse is uneven. Rural communities survive longer, but urban areas collapse quickly. The death toll is high in oil-dependent nations, but lower in rural, subsistence farming communities. Africa will take 14 to 30 days to fully collapse. Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands. Oceania is a collection of island nations and large, sparsely populated countries, all of which are heavily dependent on imported oil and food. Australia and New Zealand are wealthy, developed nations, but they rely on oil for transportation and agriculture. The Pacific Islands are even more vulnerable, small, remote, and completely dependent on imports. Australia is a large, sparsely populated country. It has massive agricultural land and abundant natural resources, but it relies on oil for diesel machinery, for farming and mining, and transportation, 80% of Australia's population lives in cities along the coast. These cities rely on imported food and oil. When oil vanishes, diesel trucks can't transport food from rural farms to cities. The cities run out of food within 3 to 5 days. Power grids, which rely on coal, transported by diesel trucks, and natural gas, powered by oil, fail within 48 hours. Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane lose power and water. Rural communities in Australia's outback, which rely on diesel generators for power and water, run out of fuel within days. They're stranded, with no way to get supplies. Australia's mining industry, which is a major part of its economy, collapses overnight. Mining machinery runs on diesel. The outback becomes a death trap: extreme heat, no water, no food. People die of dehydration and heat stroke. New Zealand is an island nation that imports 90% of its oil and 40% of its food. When oil vanishes, there's no way to bring in supplies. Auckland, New Zealand's largest city, loses power in 24 hours. Water systems fail. The country's agricultural sector, which relies on diesel tractors and fertilizers, collapses. Sheep and cattle can't be transported to market, and there's no way to process meat. Rural communities in New Zealand's countryside fare better. They can grow their own food and raise livestock. But they rely on imported medicine and tools. Without oil, those tools break, and there's no way to replace them. The Pacific Islands, small islands like Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga, are completely dependent on imported oil and food. They have no natural resources to sustain themselves. When oil vanishes, ships can't deliver food, water, or medicine. These islands run out of food within days. The population starve or die of dehydration. Some islanders try to flee to Australia or New Zealand, but without boats, which run on diesel, they're trapped. The Pacific Islands become uninhabitable within a week. Overall, Oceania collapses in 7 to 14 days. Australia and New Zealand's rural communities survive longer, but their cities collapse quickly. The Pacific Islands are the first to become uninhabitable. The death toll will be in the millions, with the Pacific Islands losing most of their populations. Years later, The post-oil world with ye walked through the hours, the days, the weeks, and the continent-by-continent collapse. But what happens after the dust settles? What does the world look like years after oil vanishes? The answer is grim, but it's not the end of the human race. It's the end of modern civilization as we know it. The human population will be cut in half, maybe more. Billions of people will die from starvation, disease, violence, hypothermia, and dehydration. The world's population, which is currently 8 billion, will drop to 3 to 4 billion within 5 years. The cities will be abandoned, lawless, overgrown, and toxic. Skyscrapers will crumble. Roads will crack and be reclaimed by nature. Fires will burn out, leaving behind ash and ruin. The air will clear, no more pollution from cars, factories, or power plants. But the silence will be deafening. The survivors will be those who are self-sufficient, people who can grow their own food, collect clean water, and live without modern technology. Rural communities, indigenous peoples, and preppers will be the ones who survive. They will go back to traditional ways of life, farming with horses and oxen, using hand tools, collecting rainwater, and making their own clothes from natural fibers. They will form small, tight-knit communities, because in a post-oil world, cooperation is the only way to survive. Trust will be rebuilt, but it will be slow. Technology will regress. No more cell phones, no more internet, no more electricity, except for small, local renewable energy sources like solar panels and wind turbines, which will eventually break and can't be replaced. No more cars, no more planes, no more ships. Travel will be done on foot, by bike, or by horse. Medicine will regress to pre-20th century levels, herbal remedies, basic surgery, no antibiotics. Diseases that were once eradicated, cholera, typhoid, smallpox, will return. Life expectancy will drop dramatically. The environment will begin to heal. Without oil, there will be no more deforestation for agriculture, since modern farming requires oil. No more plastic pollution, plastic will break down over time, and no new plastic will be made. Wildlife will return to cities and rural areas. The oceans will clear of oil spills and plastic. The air will be clean. But this healing will come at a terrible cost, billions of human lives lost. This is the world we've built. A world that is completely and utterly dependent on a single, finite resource. A world that will collapse if that resource is taken away. But here's the thing, oil won't vanish instantly. It will run out gradually. We have time to prepare. We have time to transition to renewable energy. We have time to build a more self-sufficient, sustainable world. This video is not a doomsday prophecy. It's a warning. A warning that our current way of life is unsustainable. A warning that we need to act now, before it's too late. We have the technology to transition to renewable energy. We have the knowledge to build more sustainable food systems. We have the ability to reduce our dependence on oil. We just need the will to build a better, safer, more sustainable world. If you made it all the way through this 60+ minute documentary, thank you. This is one of the most important topics I've ever covered. Drop a comment below, which continent surprised you the most? What would you do first if oil disappeared tomorrow? Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you love. Awareness is the first step to survival. I'm Eric, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay prepared, and stay aware.